Hi everyone and welcome back to this channel on narcissism, narcissistic relationships, and healing from narcissistic relationships, as well as the myriad questions that come up. Today's question is, what is dark empath narcissism? How do you spot it? And what do you do about it? If you're new here, please subscribe and join the community. So today we are talking about a very interesting sort of hybrid term, which is the dark empath. So basically this would be someone who has narcissistic characteristics but who also has what we might consider empathy. Now, why would anyone ever want to call themselves a dark empath? Well, this is a term that is often used by people who have some narcissistic characteristics, but then they will use the fact that they have some empathetic qualities to justify their behavior. A person with dark empath tendencies may actually genuinely believe that they have empathy, but because their concept of empathy is flawed, they really aren't very good at recognizing what other people need or how they feel. Rather, they recognize how people want to feel, especially in terms of wanting to be admired or praised. So they will go out of their way to get validation, admiration, and praise for themselves. They might look like the life of the party, but when you talk to people after the fact, you will hear them say things like, "Oh, they were so funny," or "they were just telling story after story. Everyone was hanging on every word. They were so interesting." That's classic narcissistic supply-seeking behavior, but it can feel really good at the time. This form of dark empath narcissism can really fool people into thinking there isn't anything wrong with these folks because they are so disarming and charming and funny. But if you start to look a little bit deeper, you will see that these folks are still very self-centered and they are still very much focused on how people view them. Dark empaths often have a sense of entitlement. They believe that people should do nice things for them and give to them because they are so amazing. Yet they will point to their generosity and giving nature as evidence that they are not narcissistic. They believe that their generosity and their giving makes up for any entitled behavior. Dark empaths also tend to be more vulnerable than other narcissists. They are not as resistant to criticism as other narcissists are. And they will point to their ability to take criticism as evidence that they are not narcissistic. But this vulnerability is only skin deep. When they are criticized, they may appear to internalize the criticism and maybe even cry, but then they will ruminate and obsess about the criticism and find ways to blame others for it, and may even find ways to punish those people. So although they may not be outwardly defensive or angry about the criticism still gets under their skin. Now, one way to differentiate a dark empath from an insecure or vulnerable narcissist is that the dark empath wants validation and praise and admiration more than they want to win. The insecure narcissist wants to win. For the dark empath, it's all about being seen as the best and being number one. They climb over people to get what they want and then tell you how great they are. The dark empath takes great pleasure in pointing out the faults of others and will actually gloat about it. I worked with a woman years ago who had a dark empath manager. This manager would literally make it a point to go around the office saying things like, "You know, I got passed over for that promotion because I didn't kiss the boss's ass. He's such an asshole, right?" Or she would say, "I'm not surprised Smith wasn't able to handle that client. He's such a loser. I told the boss he shouldn't have put him on that account." You can imagine how demoralizing it was for the staff to work for this person. Dark empaths are quite adept at making you feel stupid. They will very casually point out your mistakes and then laugh at you. And then when you're gone, they will do it to other people. Dark empaths like to dominate conversations and will often use your own stories against you. They will take your accomplishments and make them seem like they are their accomplishments. You will find that when you are interacting with dark empaths, you feel small, stupid, and demeaned. People with this dark empath style often present as being very charismatic and charming and funny and generous and warm and friendly. They will surround themselves with lots of friends. Many people will like them or even love them. And yet they will still be unhappy because they need more. They always need more praise and more attention. The dark empath will actively seek out situations where they can show off their knowledge and intelligence. You will find them at parties telling story after story, joke after joke. They are often very well read and very well versed in many topics, and they will pull out obscure facts to show how smart they are. People with this dark empath style are often high achievers. They want the corner office and the biggest bonus and the most toys. They need to be the ones who are always invited, and they need to be the ones who are always chosen first. People like this are often competitive, and they are not afraid to step on people to get ahead. But here's the thing. Whether we are talking about a malignant narcissist or a vulnerable narcissist or a grandiose narcissistic person or a psychopath, every single flavor of narcissism, narcissistic personality organization is always going to share certain commonalities. One of the key commonalities is that they all have underlying vulnerabilities that cannot be repaired. There is no amount of therapy or insight or medication that is going to change that. What we have to remember is that the childhood experiences that created that core vulnerability lead to defenses that the person evolved in order to survive, including narcissistic defenses. Because of that, these patterns are very deeply ingrained. So why is this person using the term dark empath? It's almost like they are trying to explain it away or make excuses for their behavior. You can see how they might think of themselves as empathetic, but they're not. They're actually very deficient in empathy. When we are looking at the underlying causes, these are people who had emotional abuse in their childhood, maybe even physical abuse. In essence, they were devalued and demeaned and shamed. As children, they were very dependent upon the adults in their lives to meet their basic needs, and the adults failed them. These were children who grew up feeling very unsafe in the world. Their parents were either too overwhelmed with their own issues to notice the child or were indifferent to the child's needs. They grew up feeling invisible. These children were very attuned to the emotions of the people around them, and they learned that in order to survive, they had to figure out what those emotions meant and how to navigate them. They figured out that certain emotions meant safety and connection and love, while other emotions meant abandonment, rejection, and rage. And they became experts at mimicking the emotions that got them what they needed. However, they weren't really feeling these emotions. They were just recognizing the emotions and learning how to shape-shift in order to get their needs met. They became very attuned to what people wanted, but not necessarily what people needed. Many of these individuals were abused by parents who had narcissistic characteristics. In fact, all of the flavors of narcissism share this pattern, that they had a parent who had narcissistic characteristics. Because of this, they learned that in order to survive, they had to develop what we might call manipulative empathy. So they learned how to mimic empathy. They learned how to read subtle social cues. They learned how to interpret body language and facial expressions and tone of voice. They learned to read social situations and to manipulate them for their own benefit. They learned that in order to survive, they had to play on other people's emotions. So they learned how to read the adult world and to get their needs met by playing on people's emotions. This taught them how to empathize with people. It taught them how to fake empathy. But it never taught them how to feel empathy. We could also argue that these folks have a cognitive empathy, but it's a cognitive empathy that is rooted in manipulation, control, and domination. So these folks are highly skilled at mimicking empathy, but it's a form of empathy that doesn't allow room for another person's feelings or needs. It's a form of empathy that is simply a tool for getting what they want. And because they didn't learn to feel empathy, they don't understand when they are violating other people's feelings or needs. They can genuinely believe that they are being empathetic when they are really being quite cruel. Because these folks have underlying trauma, I do believe that they can do therapy. And that they can become more aware of their limitations, and that they can become more aware of their vulnerabilities. Therapy is unlikely to change their empathy deficits, but it may help them understand why they struggle with empathy, and it may help them gain insight into how their behavior affects other people. If you are dealing with someone who calls themselves a dark empath, know that they are likely struggling with underlying vulnerabilities that cannot be repaired. Know that although they may have some empathetic skills, their empathy is rooted in manipulation, control, and domination, and it's not going to change. Know that you cannot repair them. Know that the most empathetic thing you can do for yourself is to set healthy boundaries around their behavior and to recognize that there is nothing wrong with you. You are not the problem. They are not a hybrid between an empath and a narcissist. They are a narcissist who struggles with empathy. Thanks again.